Hi everyone, and welcome to the latest edition of the Vitality Coaches Wellbeing Programme. My name is Jamie and my role at Vitality is Head of Health Engagement. Now, what we're trying to create with these conversations is about inspiring and sharing people's stories. And one of my favourite quotes is that opinion is the lowest form of knowledge. And I think our guest today embodies that entirely. He may have risen to stardom in reality television, but actually his story goes way beyond that. He's one of the most inspiring people that I know. He's probably one of the most passionate speakers that I know. And it's a real privilege to be able to sit here and share his messages with you, because I genuinely believe there's so much value that can be gained from that. Maybe he talks about his situation and his experiences, but actually these translate into every single person's daily life. So I really hope that you enjoy our conversation today. Please do get involved, share it far and wide, and we'll hopefully see you on the other side. Josh, we finally made it happen.
We did.
Thank you so much for your time. This is one that I've wanted to do for a really long time. I think that you know that I don't want to put too much on you already, but I do admire a lot of the things that you've done already. And I think actually your story is so interesting and there's so much that you offer and give. So in terms of context, I think it's important that we start right at the beginning of your journey, because I know that people watching this will probably notice you, they might recognize you. And actually, I want to understand how you reflect on your kind of like rise to notoriety and the experiences that gave you in the early parts of your career.
Yeah, it's all been a bit crazy. I don't know if I ever really come to terms with what's been achieved or what's been done. You kind of reflect on these moments, and there's maybe times where it's late at night and I might go on YouTube and watch an old video of something that myself and my team have done together. And I think it's in those moments that's when I really look back and go, this was ridiculous. Because I feel like for me it's always a process. I'm always maybe focused on the next thing, and I never really digest probably what I've done, or it's only when somebody comes up to you and maybe has acknowledged something that you've done which really humbles you that you kind of go, wow, actually, do you know what, this has impacted more than the one person that I probably intended it to. Yeah,
I think that's an interesting point, is that you're obviously starting in a reality TV kind of way. That's probably how most people know you. But over the last couple of years, it really seems like you've evolved people's perception of who you are. That seemed to me to be quite a conscious decision. Was there a moment or a particular time when you thought, actually, that isn't what I want to do anymore? There's a lot more that I can offer in a different way?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, when it comes to things like reality, it's such an incredible opportunity, I think, if you go into it with a plan in mind. I think the issue with that industry is that you have no control over how you're perceived or what goes on. Mm-hmm. You know, you can obviously control the behavior of your own actions, but when it comes to a director or a producer or the story writer, whatever it may be, that's when it starts to become counterproductive. Mm-hmm. So when you're super passionate about things outside of that and it starts to impact it, that's when I think you've got to start asking questions, because the reality is you want to utilize that platform to connect with as many people as possible and open those doors. And I think that's when it just got to the point to me where I had an amazing run. I got to a point where I was going to become a dad. I hit a certain age, and you just have to know when the timing's right and when it's up. And for me, that's what it was. And I think, any individual that goes into reality anyway, you're naturally going to be, people, there's a stigma, I guess, around that. Mm-hmm. People will maybe make a preempt decision on who you are and what you are capable of achieving. And I got quite a lot of negativity towards the latter stage of me being on it. And it was only by doing certain things where we managed to sort of I guess, refresh my reputation, So I probably was up against it anyway. But, the nice thing about what I do now is that you can't manipulate that. It's so raw and real. Yeah. And for me, it's just been so refreshing to not have somebody tamper with the work and the passion that I have. Mm-hmm. And slowly but surely, and it has taken a very, very long time, people now are starting to acknowledge and invest in it, which is just amazing.
I think that brutality of media and social media was a point at which clearly, again, I think those things probably accumulated for you and you made a change. But I remember that actually you talking about mental health seemed to be a big catalyst for that change. And I remember you said something about that you've said that your biggest challenge in life is to redefine people's perception of how mental health is seen and the kind of stigmas attached with it and how others live with it. And you've been really incredibly open about your experiences with that, and I know how powerful that's been. Are you able to share maybe where you first realised that these feelings that you were having were maybe things that you would need to deal with, and why you actually started wanting to share that more outwardly?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, touching on your point there, I think that was one of my major frustrations, right? Is that this disease that you live with and the impact that it has on you, when you go into something and you've got such a huge ambition and you've got a goal, which is I want to redefine the way an individual lives with mental illness and how they perceive others too, if you haven't had it or lived with it yourself. You go on a TV show and things are going really well, you're having the impact that you wanted to and that momentum's building, and then one day somebody decides that your story is going to be changed and you start feeling like you're taking steps back. It's really frustrating because it's such a sensitive topic.
Yeah.
You know, it's not something that's disposable.
Yeah.
And so for me, that was why it was so important to kind of get away from it, because I'd shared so much on such a public platform and I felt like that momentum was starting to build, and then we were almost kind of taking steps back. And it's really hard to share your truth.
Yeah.
Because you are naturally going to be judged. And I think it's only in the past number of years where I feel like, because so many people have started to speak so openly about it and there's so much more focus on it, where people are maybe starting to empathize a little bit more than they once did.
Right. I think one of the reasons why I wanted to speak to you so much is because when you talk about it, like, your voice carries weight. And I really feel like you've been through it. How tough did it get for you? And what was it that made you think that I'm going to share this story? Because like you say, if you've got a following, you're being vulnerable, right? Like, that's a tough thing to do.
Yeah. I mean, I guess it's just that saying of just don't judge a book by its cover. You know, I think I come from a very privileged background, so immediately that's like a marker against me, right? Because people will naturally assume that you haven't had hardships. Listen, the reality is, it doesn't matter how big your house is or how much money you have in the bank. You know, it sucks no matter what, in all honesty.
Yeah.
And I have to do what I have to do every single day to survive, to get through what it is that I'm doing. And I can assure you, no money in this world can resolve that.
Wow.
You know, that's just hard work and understanding and trying to make the right decisions to prevent yourself from making those wrong mistakes. Yeah, I mean, this is something that started from a very young age, and it's something that is happening today and will happen tomorrow. And I think the hardest thing is to accept that. It's something, you know, like anything, we live in a society now where we just want to resolve and fix things immediately, and when it doesn't, we panic.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, this is a disease that I've inherited for some reason. I don't have the answer to that. It's not something I want, but it's something that I've had to accept to live with. And actually what can come from living with it. And I don't think we see enough of that. That's the reality, is that how can we actually convert this really toxic, horrendous energy into something really, really special and powerful. And I want to start, I'd love to be the pioneer where we can redefine that, like I said, but you can't do it alone.
I think that we're definitely going to get into all of those things that you're doing to support with that. And what I really like about the way you talk as well is, like, you're not saying it's done. You're not saying the challenge will ever stop, but you know that it's an ongoing piece of work. But just wondering if there's an important lesson that you've learned or a piece of advice that you've been given regarding mental health, about how that's had the biggest impact on you, because you are really good to speak about it. And I know that's some advice that some people give, but not everyone's the same. So is there one thing that really resonated with you that made the biggest difference?
The environment. The environment is just so important. You know, it took me a number of years, a lot of friendships, a lot of conversations, a lot of frustrations to understand that you have to just speak to the right people, and you have to surround yourself with the right people. You'll have friends in your life that make you laugh more than others, but they can't have that conversation. And it's because unless that individual has lived with it themselves or been exposed to it, how are they ever meant to understand or have that empathy that you desire? And patience is so important. Like I said, you're not going to fix it today. You might not fix it tomorrow. You may never fix it. So I think just patience with the process and acceptance too, and it just makes it just that little bit easier to live with.
Yeah, well, Paddy, our cameraman, actually has a tattoo which says "Give it a mile," and I think that's great. Like, it's obviously relating to running specifically, but life more generally. I know that there's a quote from, like, there's a panel of actors sitting around a table, and they're saying, kind of, I think it's like Robert De Niro or someone, he's like, if you're feeling really good, if you feel great, just wait. because there'll be a time when it doesn't feel great, and you need to do exactly the same things. You need to accept when things are good, you need to accept when they're not good, and actually what you need to do in those times is probably nothing. Just enjoy them for what they are.
Yeah, 100%. You've got to, I think when you're feeling good, you've got to cherish that moment.
Yeah.
And when you're going through a tough time, you have to reflect on it.
Yeah.
Because nothing lasts forever.
Yeah.
And I don't think that's a bad thing. I don't think you want one single feeling to last forever, because I think you need one in order to value the other.
I think that that leads us pretty nicely. I think that's called a segue. I don't know, I'm not a pro at this, but I think
you're killing this. I think they got the best man to do this.
Wow, that's huge.
The flow
feedback.
is phenomenal.
Thank you very much. I'll probably ruin it now, but I want to go into challenge, because I know that has been something that's had a massive impact on you. And I'm going to read one of your own quotes where you said, "Every challenge I do is to impact a person's perception of how they see themselves." So 3 challenges that really, really stand out for me was riding beyond limits. So you pushed on a wheelchair from John O'Groats to Land's End, the length of the country. Then you had the 24-hour patio run. So you ran 105 miles, was it, around your patio in 24 hours? And then Run 4 Nations, the most recent one, which I was really lucky to be at the premiere at. Honestly, one of the most unbelievable things. I'm not just saying that, like, I am inspired by you, and I'm starting to do a bit, and I still can't understand how you do that. But I guess from speaking with you and listening to you, I know that embracing these challenges has changed your life. And now it changes other people's lives as well. What do these challenges do for you, though?
Once upon a time, they used to save me. Really? And I'm trying to change that into something healthier. I don't know what it is. As I get older, you're always going to be faced with difficult times and difficult people. And I think for so long in my life, this is why I empathize with anyone that gets to that point where they want to take their life. It gets to the point where it's intolerable. And I unfortunately live with something where I just resent myself, maybe physically, mentally, imposter syndrome times 100. I don't know why. And it gets too much, and it's tiring. You don't want to wake up and feel like that every single day. And I don't like compliments, and I feel uncomfortable when somebody does praise you. So you're kind of in a hard place. And I think I started to do these challenges, and by achieving them, it enabled me to remind myself actually that when that voice tells me that I am irrelevant and I have no value, that actually it's a load of shit, But things change. I became a father, and I think it's about purpose as well. I often look at other people, and I envy so many people on what they do. It doesn't matter what it could be. And I guess I wake up each day and I really don't know what my purpose is in this life. I really don't. And I think the first moment probably in my life where I felt like I did is when I accomplished my first challenge, and then when my daughter was born, that became my second. And so things are shifting. I still have many, many moments and many, many days where, I have that negative feeling, but to be able to reflect on so many of these moments now and so many experiences that I share with my daughter, it really is starting to impact me in a positive way.
When you say there, it kind of challenges saved you. Like, it's so much that it gives you, but it also gives other people so much. And I know maybe you don't like compliments, but I genuinely do see the impact of what you do on other people. But when you say it saves you, when you've done that challenge, what is it that it gives you?
It does give me purpose. I think the money that we raise, the people that reach out to me and the messages that I receive, to know that it impacts them. I don't want, Jamie, people to feel the way that I do. And if by bringing an awareness and opening up a conversation by doing the challenges that I do can achieve that, that's all I want. When the core message behind, say, a particular challenge is suicide prevention, there are times where I am so physically and mentally broken and the pain becomes insufferable. But when you know that giving up is not an option, because it completely contradicts the message that you're trying to to spread
Yeah.
as far as possible to individuals that in that moment in time are equally going through something, maybe not necessarily so physical, but mentally they are. You know, it's really empowering. And so at the end of it, to know that, you know, we haven't managed to maybe save everyone, but if we can save 4 or 5, you know, it's like that domino effect. By impacting that person, you're going to impact the you know, the bigger picture, which is friends and family.
Yeah.
The crazy thing is that sometimes you never even know that you've impacted that person's life. You may never hear from them, but I think, you know, it's there.
Yeah. Like, obviously, I can understand why and how you can achieve what you do, and that reasoning is behind it. But you set the tone now. Like, you are leading the way, and you are doing things that are really pushing yourself. And I'm excited to see where it goes next and where it will end. But why are you so passionate about encouraging others to push their limits as well? Obviously, you had a podcast called Limitless, which was all about people finding their full potential. What is it that you encouraging other people gives back to you? Like, why are you so, like, positive with other people? Why do you want to bring them up so much? Because it's amazing how you do it. But I also feel like you're giving so much, and it must be tough.
Because I think, unfortunately, society really breaks us down. And, you know, I don't know why, but I've felt for the most part in my life that I'm very much alone. Like, I've got amazing parents, I've got good friends, but for what I need, I haven't necessarily felt as supported as I'd like to be. And that's why I think it's so important to do this, to share that voice. Now, although I might not have that one-on-one contact with them, I would like to think by the way that I articulate it, they can actually feel my passion, that I want them equally to go on and do something. And I think it makes it more authentic, because I think we look at statistics, and this isn't defying or disrespecting science or anyone in the medical field, but I've met so many remarkable people over the last number of years who have been written off based on stats, and they've just gone, F it. Like, if that's the outcome, then what risk is there for me to even attempt doing something? And they've defied what they've been told. Well, should we not be trying to inspire more people with that mindset? Because I think too often when somebody lives with a condition, it's kind of like, right, this is what I accept. And actually, I don't think you should. I think there's so much more to each individual than what they know. But I think what's really important is actually how we communicate that message to each individual. And again, I think I very much maybe go about things how maybe I would wish things to be executed maybe to myself. Because actually, each individual, there's a way in which you can connect with them. Some like to be shouted at, some like to be cuddled, some like, you know, a soft tone of voice, like just weird varieties, but that's just the reality of it. But if we can actually find what it is in order to connect to that person, what they're capable of achieving, no matter what they're faced with, honestly, is unlimited. And that's why I came up with the podcast Limitless, because I felt like every single individual that I was meeting just embodied that message. And the reality is, we don't know what our limits are, right? The only limitation is what society tells us we can and can't do. Well, it's only when an individual goes and breaks that barrier that it then becomes unlimitless, right? So for me, I just think with these challenges, this was my way. It wasn't a case of not connecting so much with women, but for men, there's such an issue right now with toxic male masculinity and being able to connect with individuals, and you know what a perception of an alpha male actually is. Well, I'm an emotional guy. I show my vulnerability, and I also put myself through these really physical challenges. Well, hopefully by doing these challenges, I can connect with those individuals, and actually from what I've had in terms of feedback, I can say that it does work. So for me, I feel like I am impacting, and maybe that's just my spin on how I can communicate that message to people. There's nothing wrong with panel talks, having discussions like we're having now, but I feel like that definitely caters for a certain demographic. But there's other individuals out there that maybe we can connect with too.
Yeah, no, I 100% get that. I think, like, these challenges are your vehicle for sharing your message. And I mentioned, obviously, Riding Beyond Limits, Run for Nations, and the 24-hour patio run. 3 very different challenges. I wonder if you could just give us a brief overview of what each one was, but maybe more importantly for that, what the purpose behind each one was, and then maybe, like, I know that you get something from every challenge, so was there like a moment or a thing that you got from each of those that you knew that it was worthwhile doing, and you got everything that you wanted from it?
Do you know what's really interesting about all 3 of those challenges, which people probably wouldn't know, is that going into all 3 of them, I was possibly at my lowest.
Really?
I was literally on my knees.
Really?
In such a bad way.
And is that why you wanted to do them, or
I already committed to it.
Right, so it wasn't...
And just the timing, just so many things had happened to me in my life behind closed doors, and I'd gone into it, and mentally, in terms of preparation, it wasn't right. But because I was surrounded by the right people who said the right thing to me, and just because of what we were trying to achieve, it just propelled me to just face it head on. And that's why I think, from a personal point, when we accomplish these things, for me it is, the money and the message is so valuable, but actually just the personal accomplishment of being able to achieve that with the headspace that I was in, for me personally, that was just so valuable.
We will go back to the question, but I think that's such an interesting point, and something that I'm fascinated about as well is people's... so you can outwardly say that you're doing these challenges for a certain reason. I'm currently doing it. But that doesn't get me up at 5 a.m. to do my training. Like, that isn't actually the thing. Between you and I, like, there's things inside of me that that's why I do it, and there's a positive message that I want to share, but I don't think it's the wrong thing to say that that isn't enough to get me up to do these things. Because, like you say, you're pushing yourself to a place that is so tough.
Yeah.
But all of the people that we've had the opportunity to interview in these things have had some form of adversity. Yeah. And I never think that you should look at that as a positive, right? Like, something tragic can happen in your life. I don't think that means that you're going to turn it into a positive and you'll be grateful for it. I think that thing will still always be a negative, but I do think there's an opportunity that you can pivot and use that as fuel. And I think, there's a saying, like, never waste a crisis. How important do you think adversity is to fueling these things? Like, do you think it would be possible to achieve these things if you weren't at those lows, or if you hadn't experienced those moments?
Anything's possible. You don't have to face adversity to achieve these things. There are men, women and children out there that can achieve anything that they want to, whether they have or they haven't. Mm-hmm. There are times, though, when I feel like you hit breaking point, where you need to find that motivation to do it, where I feel like facing those negative moments become a huge asset. And so that's why, for me, if anybody out there is affected by something, let's utilize that. Yeah. And let's turn that into something good. Yeah. Because actually, when I look back and I said to you, like, even though I was literally on my knees, I was mentally broken. Really? I look back on those moments now with such fondness to, and I don't necessarily reflect so much on the negative. I reflect on the positive that came from it. Right. What an individual may have said to me, or what I had to experience to get to that point. Yeah. Going back to your question about the three, all three were really valuable in their own way. The reason why Joggerland and Berlin was so important was because of what I was trying to achieve, which was to get my best friend to walk again. Mm-hmm. He's been left paralyzed from a motorbike accident, having come to see me on my birthday. So there's an element of me feeling maybe some responsibility, which I know is ridiculous, but had he not come that day, would have things been very different. Now, although we were doing these challenges in the wheelchair, when you accumulate all these things together, that's what's going to get him back, because his biggest goal was to walk his daughter down the aisle one day. And I wanted to be a part of that. I needed to ensure that he would achieve that. Yeah. When it came to the patio challenge, I was going through so much in my personal life where certain individuals were actually trying to utilize my openness about my mental illness against me in order to take something that was the most valuable to me. Mm-hmm. So to go into that challenge, when I found out that there was a 37% increase in phone calls, suicidal phone calls, the way I was feeling in that moment and the empathy I felt for each individual, although I was struggling, I would say to the level that a lot of them were, I was financially in a stable place. I had a roof over my head. In terms of paying my bills, I didn't have those concerns. So for me, it was weighing it up. Yeah. And so if I could do something to help those individuals that didn't have that, for me, it was an absolute no-brainer. And trust me, like, running 24 hours around a patio on your own it was a struggle. I mean, I had one guy with me who had to be there. Technically, I think we were breaking rules, but for medical reasons, if I did collapse, I needed someone there to just be able to call up, 911, is it? I don't even know what the number is.
I think maybe 911.
Is it 999? Oh, 911 was the American one, right? Well, that's why I needed him there, so that he called the right number. Yeah. Otherwise, I would have been there for a long time. Yeah. And then when we went into Run for Nations, again, a lot of stuff was going on with me, and I feel like with that particular challenge, You know, I have a chip on my shoulder. I'm going to be honest. I know a lot of people try and come out with a lot of positives. If somebody has affected me in my life and inflicted any physical or emotional pain, I will hold on to that for probably the rest of my life. But again, I convert it into a really positive like fuel to do what I need to do. And so going into that, for me, that was about delivering a message about somebody who is struggling with their mental health, and again, what is possible. And I just, you know, that was one of the greatest things I've achieved in my life to this day, and one I reflect on with just like so much pride.
Yeah, I think one of the sayings that I enjoy most is emotion is energy, and you clearly have that and channel it in the right ways, and it becomes negative when maybe you use it for detriment. Every challenge I've seen you do, there's been a strong start. You've always, obviously, it's like life, like the start is always going well. Then there's been like a bit where you need to get your head down, then inevitably kind of 2/3 in, there's a real low point, but then you've always ended really strong. I remember the Patterson run, I think you did 11 miles or so in the last like hour and a half or something, like crazy pace. Run 4 Nations, you needed to do a quick last marathon to get that 24-hour period.
Quick 24-hour period.
The next line is which you did. You're gonna move. Some banging outtakes, Paddy.
Quick 24-hour period. That shut.
Nice. Which you did. What is it that you think brings you back again? Like, because you're done. You're literally, it's over. But somehow you pull through. I really want to find out if I have that. I don't know. Like, I don't feel like I've got into that hole enough to come back out of it. What is it that you find in those moments that brings you up again?
Like I said, just you've got to reflect on why you're doing it. And I think if I was to go into that, and this isn't a negative to the individuals, like I said, who have not faced a form of adversity, but if I was going into that, and for me it was about ego, validation, or timings, or to win something, I don't think I'd get through it, because that doesn't work for me, but that would work for somebody else. For me, it's reflecting on the adversity that I have faced. And for me, it's you know, the momentary pain, or I always say the feeling of failure will always outweigh the momentary pain, which is so true. You know, how I feel in that moment is not going to feel the same once that challenge has come to an end. It might take me a week or a month, but eventually it will start to subside, right? Whereas that feeling for me of not delivering the message to the best of its ability, that will affect me, I know, for the rest of my life. And so it's a no-brainer. I think it's also, like I said, with your environment, it's having the right individual saying the right thing to you. There were 2 moments in 2 particular challenges. First one where I said I was really on my knees, and my friend turned to me and said, it's your choice. If you don't want to do it, no one's going to judge you. But if you're going to do it, don't f*** it up for the rest of us. Sorry, I don't know if you can swear, I'm sorry. But that was his wording. Don't mess it up for the rest of us, you nincompoop. Didn't say that. He would have lost me. Would have lost me if he said that. But he was just saying, you are setting out to set a world record here. If you're going to do this, the only option you have is to get this record for all of us. And so for me, I was fired up, and that was that. The second one, I remember I had to do 60 miles on this particular day in a chair, and I was completely and utterly broken, and I had nothing to give. And that was when Chris King, who was like our logistics guy, came on board, basically just told me to shut the F up, and that pain was ultimately something to be grateful for, and showed great success of what you'd done that day. Not sure I really agreed with him in the moment in time how I was feeling, but you know, for him, he was just like, embrace it. So I embraced it, accepted what was going on, and I ended up going into a flow state, which very few people I think have really ever experienced, but it is one of the most euphoric, eye-opening things you'll ever go through in your life, where you feel like you're done and buried, and you break through this barrier that you think is impenetrable, and you just turn into a different beast. So in that moment, I'd gone from broken, probably pushing 5 miles an hour, to pushing 50 miles an hour and holding that for 5 miles, and having to be physically restrained at the end of it. I went into a completely different headspace, and that for me is something that I hold on to now for every challenge that I ever go into. And I had it again with Run 4 Nations, where I remember saying to Ben, my running coach, there are going to be so many times in this relationship where you're going to question me and what I'm capable of, and there are going to be times where you think I'm dead and buried and I'm going to give up. just wait. And I was like, there'll be a time where I'll surprise you. And in this particular moment with Run for Nations, I'd incurred so many injuries. We were losing time to the point where the challenge we wouldn't have succeeded. And Ben just turned to me and was just like, if you continue at this pace, you might as well give up now. And from that moment on, I clicked my finger and we just switched on. And you saw in like the latter part of that documentary where the timing, the pace, everything, we just went into that flow state. And that's the first time Ben actually did turn to me and was like, I get what you mean now.
Respect.
I get it.
Sounds like tough love's what you need, which is a bit annoying sometimes, I imagine.
No, you need it. You need the right level of tough love and empathy. You can't just be like cushioned the entire time. Yeah. But like I said, it has to be the right person to do it. If a complete stranger's shouting in your face, you're naturally gonna deflect.
This goes out the week ahead of the London Marathon, and the crowds are incredible. But I remember so many occasions where people 5 miles away would be like, "Not long to go left," and I'm like, if you've just run 21 miles, so far to go.
It's when it's like 11 miles and they're like, you're so close now.
You're winding up there. Yeah, exactly. Do you feel pressure to do these things?
No, it's a privilege. Like I said, this is one of two things in my life that give me purpose to live.
Wow.
Like it's a gift.
What would your advice be to people watching now? Because we've had so many people, the response always when we talk about mental health and men's mental health is there's so much that comes in, which always makes me think there's so many people that aren't talking and aren't doing enough. What would your advice be to people that want to do a little bit more physically to improve their mental well-being? Like, what would you say to them to get started on that journey?
Come find me.
Go for it. It's a good
Come find me and your world's your oyster.
Agreed.
I would back that. Genuinely, I believe I can enable anyone to achieve anything.
What would you do? So I've come to you. What would you do?
You've got to understand the person. I would want to dig deep and hopefully they would at points feel comfortable to share as much with me as possible, because I think that's, like I said, that's a real privilege, and that's for somebody to feel like they can do that with you, that's hard. And it's something you've got to nurture, because it takes a lot for somebody to do that. And I think a lot of people haven't, because maybe at some point in their life they've tried to, and the individual that they've maybe shared it with did not value the moment that they were sharing. So yeah, I would say, if you want to 100% approach me, it would be an honor.
I have to say that this goes out 2 days before I'm doing a challenge to run 7 marathons in 7 days, and I spoke to you about it, and the response that you gave me was just like, I was a bit unsure, I kind of wanted to do it. And you didn't even acknowledge that part. You were like, I'm so excited to do this. And I think that energy gave me all that I really needed to go on and want to figure it out. Like, I don't know the answers. I don't know if it would be possible. But you and Runner and everyone in the team kind of gets that. And I know that there's going to be hurdles that are going to be maybe intolerable at points. There's going to be important situations that will shape me in this challenge. But the kind of purpose behind it is the connections with people. How do you see the importance of people with doing not only these challenges, again, making it relatable to people in everyday lives, around the workplace, around the home? Like, what would your advice be around like creating those meaningful and nurturing connections that you mentioned earlier?
It's so important, but also people around you that have the ability to do that. If you look at this right now, there are 3 pieces to this puzzle, right? In order for this to become whole, you need all 3 to connect, which without you doing this and articulating yourself in the way, without me hopefully answering the questions in a way that I can connect with people, and Paddy behind the camera being able to actually capture that moment, you can't do it on your own. If you do, I'm not saying you're going to do a shoddy job, but don't be afraid to connect with people and have them come on board. You are stronger in numbers in any walk. And I think that, with running, I think so many people come into it and they think that it's such an individual sport, but actually, like, there's never been a bigger team, for me that's so incredibly valuable.
And obviously with the work that you are doing as Runner now, supporting me and so many people with their goals and achievements, why is running your vehicle? Because it seems like I want to take this away from running now. Is there things that you've experienced through these challenges and running that help you in other parts of your life? And how because you have a real strong community at Runner, And I feel like you portray that message across to people,
Yeah.
even if it's not about running. So how do you do that, and what does it give you outside of this space as well?
I think it's just by building this community enables us to spread this message more, that anything is possible. You know, every time you meet an individual and they've just started running and like they're even struggling to comprehend doing a 5K, first question I ask them is, are you going to do an ultra? And they're like, what? They're like, I can't do that. It's like,
Yeah.
why?
Yeah.
Why can you not do an ultra?
Yeah.
Go from 5K. To be able to take someone from a 5K to 250K, anyone is capable of doing that. But again, you've got to keep, the question is, what's your why? Why are you doing this?
Yeah.
If you are just coming on board and you're going to get suckered into things like I have recently, where time becomes the focus and it's about being competitive and winning, like for me, I'll let somebody else do that.
Yeah.
But if you really want to dig deep and reflect on what's happened to you in your past, your present, and what potentially can happen to you in your future, I assure you any challenge that you set yourself, you'll achieve it.
I think, honestly, the Run for Nations film, like I'm getting an insight into it. I still don't understand how you did it, but that's because I'm maybe still at the equivalent of 5K stage. You know, like I now understand how you can do 7 marathons in 7 days. Once I've done that, I'll probably then get the next thing. So what's next for you in terms of this space? Like, are you still wanting to push the challenges, or do you feel like you've achieved what you wanted with those and actually you want to focus elsewhere?
So the first thing is I tend to do these things if I'm really inspired by someone. Someone tends to trigger something, or if I come up with an idea, depending on the person's reaction, can sometimes define whether I do it or not.
Okay.
Like when it came to Run for Nations, I remember I just came up with the idea in my head when I was driving, and I called my best friend Houston and said, listen, bud, I got this idea. I think I'm going to run 4 countries of the UK within 24 hours. And he literally responded with, this is where Paddy applies bloopers. Are you sure you won't be able to do it? And I was just like, this is it. Like, if he feels like it's an impossibility, that's why.
So he wasn't like, oh great, you'll nail that. It was
none of
quite
my
the
friends
opposite.
will ever be like that.
Oh, really?
No. The first question anybody, even my family, anyone will go you is it possible? If somebody asks you that, then 100% do it.
Right.
Because I think when you go into things with that magnitude, if you are trying to do this huge challenge and somebody goes, I think he could do it,
Yeah.
there's no real point you
Not the
doing
same,
it.
is it?
You need that element of like fear. You know, that question mark is the most valuable thing that comes with it, and that's what makes it exciting, because there's so many elements to it that you can have people invest in.
Yeah.
And when you start adding things like travel and weather, you know, day and night, it's just, there's so many, you know, that's what I think made that documentary so exciting. And so for me now, I had an idea in my head of what I wanted to do, and I've wanted to do it for years. My problem is that I am constantly fighting so many different people on whether or not to do these things. And I think sometimes I respect them and I listen to them. Other times I just go on ahead and I do it. And
Yeah.
I've done that, to be honest, with every other one that I've done.
Yeah.
And I've, you know, thankfully they have come to understand the why.
Yeah.
With this particular one, I think I will eventually do it. I don't want to share it yet just because we need to, but it will involve around 3 months of consistent running and a lot of distance.
Wow.
The only issue is how do we continue filming these documentaries and captivating people? Because
Yeah.
I think the running, in all honesty, for me on a personal level it's a huge asset. Watching running can sometimes get a little bit boring. So how do we try and create that magic from Run
Yeah.
for Nations on a much larger scale to keep that audience captivated? That's the question.
I think you always do these things though with humour as well. I don't know if that, I remember there was a scene in Run for Nations where you obviously had the 4 flags of the different countries of the UK, and before you started you may or may not have picked up the wrong flag.
No, I definitely did. Was it the Welsh one?
I think,
Was it the Welsh one? I was
think-
like, go on Scotland.
I didn't want to say it, but I think that did happen. But you always come to these things with like humility and humour and stuff, and yeah, that brings people on the journey as well. And that's exactly the same for me. But it's funny you say people doubting you, because people, when I mentioned my challenge, have been incredibly supportive. So they've always, of course you can do it.
Yeah.
And in myself, I'm like, I'm really like, it actually like. It doesn't worry me a bit. It doesn't frustrate me either. I don't know what the right word is, but I feel like saying to people, no, seriously, like, I'm not sure if I can. But their belief is such a privilege to having me. And like,
Yeah.
I feel indebted to people when they do something to support me on this. I don't know how to repay it. It's so nice.
So what I would say is you've probably been in this space now for so long that that's what people have come to accept.
Yeah.
So when you pitch that idea to them, because that's a part of you, they're probably more understanding.
Yeah.
I've taken myself from something and put myself into something else, and my environment does not get it.
Yeah.
It's only in the last number of years where I've formed these relationships with individuals that I've met or been inspired by that understand and support.
Yeah.
You know, my family and friends are probably my biggest disbelievers, just because they can't comprehend it, and that's fine.
Yeah.
And you know, I talk about that in the documentary, where every single time I do these challenges, they believe just that little bit more, and I know it's impacting them in some way. They're always going to have that fear. But as an adult, that's the decision that I have to make.
Yeah.
You know, I'll never take myself to a point of like, you know, risking my life.
Yeah.
But I will touch that line.
Yeah.
But I also have the knowledge and understanding, and I think the smartest thing, and I say it 1,000 times, is by having the right team members there.
Yeah.
You know, there's a big difference between you pushing that red button too soon and you wanting to push that red button, but having somebody who knows what they're doing, just pulling that hand back.
Yeah. I think that actually what has been a common theme throughout this is obviously the importance of people, both how incredibly they can be in supporting you, but also how they can be used as a fuel to keep you going. And not everyone's going to be supported the whole time, but that's okay.
Yeah.
It's about how you take that advice and that input and channel it for you. And I think that's something that you've been amazing at. And honestly, like, I've seen your challenges, and you could say whatever you wanted now for your next one, and I'd be like, do you know, why not? Like, I've seen you do things that I think are silly anyway, so in terms of the achievement, I can genuinely see that. What is final question, I think I'm stealing it from you, is what does limitless mean to you though, in terms of you personally, where you're at now? What do you want it to be for you, and what do you want it to be for other people?
I want it to be a person's ideology of how they see themselves and how they see others. You know, I want us to nurture the youth of today, you know, and prepare them for tomorrow, you know, because I don't think we do. I think everything that we focus on now becomes so focused on materialism and money, and it's not fulfilling. We know that's the answer, but we continue to do it, and I think we keep focusing our attention and putting people on pedestals as role models that are the wrong people. Again, you know, we're seeing the reactions that our youth of today are having to that, and hopefully we can try redefine what's cool, what's inspiring, what's special, what's unique.
Yeah.
You know, for so long people have been bullied because of the way that they are or the way that they feel, and actually, let's empower it.
Yeah, I think redefining what's cool is one that I can definitely resonate with. Running never used to be cool. I think you're making running quite cool, which is...
I don't know about that. I think my amazing team around me make it cool. I just vomit and look ill all the time.
You can make some jokes on that. We always end these sessions with kind of like one question, which is the same for everyone, and what I love to do is compare answers to that. So obviously at Vitality, the core of what we do is about impacting people by creating positive behaviour change. So we're not necessarily talking about the biggest things in the world. It might be daily habits that people kind of look at first. So the question to you is, it's quite a big one. Is there one change that you've made in your life that you feel has had the biggest impact on you and your well-being?
It's a great question. Honestly, just the people that I surround myself with. It's just, having the right individual around you is just so infectious. The way that they perceive you, the way that they communicate to you, the way they acknowledge you, the way that they, you know, reward you, empower you, you know, it's amazing.
Yeah.
You know, to have a friend read you and understand what it is, you know, like we talk about love languages and relationships.
Yeah.
I don't think that's just with relationships. I think that's also with friendships.
Yeah.
But to actually find an individual that understands what you need,
Yeah.
you know, for me has just been so unbelievably valuable, because those individuals have enabled me to get to this point.
I remember when Josh and I first met, we were doing a running event, and the event doesn't have a finish line.
Yeah.
So you basically run for as long as you possibly can. And you and I, about 2 hours in, just started catching eye contact, and you're like, yeah, still going. And that momentum, like, was what I wanted to be around. So I was actually looking out for you each lap, and you do embody that. And I think it's a privilege to be able to spend time with people like you. And I'd really encourage people to go and seek these kind of people, because what I love is people that make you want to be yourself more. You know, like, you don't want someone to make you feel like you need to be a different way. If that's how you feel, then they're not the right person for you. Be around people that just encourage you to be yourself even more than you already are. And what you can do with them on board is probably going to be amazing, and I've got no idea what it is, but I like that idea.
I think what I want people to really understand about myself is that I'm not coming into this as a professional athlete, and I think that's why people hopefully are connecting so much more. I'm not the fastest, I'm not the fittest, I'm not the strongest, I'm incredibly vulnerable, I break more often than not, but I get it done. Mm-hmm. And actually, I am just a broken man who is just trying to put the pieces of the puzzle back together. And like I said, I don't know how long that's going to take me. And so when I do these talks to yourself or to people, or I go on panels, or I deliver these messages with challenges, it's not because I'm the finished article, I'm far from it, but I'm making that progress, and I'm making those strides to eventually get there. And I don't know how long that's going to take. Sometimes it's really scary. But what I do know is that I am a better person today, and I've progressed more today than I did yesterday. And so for me, again, that's what I find fulfilling. So if I can kind of deliver that to people, it's not about being the finished article necessarily. It's just about making progress.
Yeah.
And how you want to get there.
There's probably no better way to wrap up than that. I think I personally have been affected by you and inspired, and hopefully that's something. Like, I can't speak for anyone else, but I genuinely do believe that sport and the power of challenge goes way beyond just the physical. And you're doing incredible things. You speak so powerfully, and that's what I mean. Like, anyone can say what you're saying, but you got to say it in a way that means something, and I think you do that so well. So it's been a privilege to chat. Thank you for your time. We're going to do some more running together. Who knows what the future holds? Yeah. And for everyone watching as well, I really hope that you've enjoyed this. We really do want to bring people's stories, and maybe it doesn't resonate with everyone, but like Josh says, if it resonates with you or a friend, share it, get the message out there, and wherever you're watching, like, subscribe, comment, all of those things. But we hope that this message goes as far as possible. So thanks again for having us.
Thank you,
Where
Amigo.
should people find you?
Any Irish bar with a Guinness.
At the end
probably.
of the night. Sounds like a plan.
Or the track.
Nice one.